Hey everyone, so it is around past 1 a.m. where I am at right now, but Columbina's kit just got revealed, so I just wanted to make a quick video talking about the kit and read over the info that we have currently and kind of explain what she does. Now this video will be less edited, I'll just kind of be going over it pretty casually. I will probably make a more edited video afterwards as we get more information, because right now we don't have any numbers, so we don't really know how good Columbina is going to be, but I just wanted to read over what her kit entails and kind of explain what she does and give my first impressions. So first things first, I do wanted to go over this first passive, very important. Moon Signs Benediction, Lend Me Your Moonlight. When the party triggers Electrocharge, Bloom, or Hydrocrystallization, they are converted to Lunar Electrocharge, Lunar Bloom, Lunar Crystallization, respectively, and she increases the Lunar Reaction base damage by 7%. So two things, 7% Lunar Reaction damage is half of what, like, for example, Anefa or Flynn's brings to their respective lunar reaction. They give 14%, but obviously 7% to the base damage is really good. Base damage is a more significant increase than regular damage. And obviously the other main important part is that Columbina can enable lunar reactions. You don't need an Anefa, you don't need Flynn's. If you just have Columbina on the team, you can trigger Lunar Charge, Lunar Bloom, or Lunar Crystallization. So that's wonderful if you skipped everyone for Columbina. And the next thing I do kind of wanted to quickly go over is what is Lunar Crystallization. That is completely new. So just to scroll over. Okay, so Lunar Crystallization. Lunar Crystallization, it replaces the normal crystallized reaction. However, it only reacts with Geo and Hydro. Can't really do lunar crystallization with like Pyro Geo like you can normally do with normal crystallized shards and stuff. So only Hydro and Geo. So what happens when you do lunar crystallization? When you have Hydro and Geo, you trigger lunar crystallize, and then 3 lunar wards will be generated near the target. And then for every 3 lunar crystallization reactions triggered, a lunar ward resonance will occur, dealing Geo damage to nearby enemies. So my assumption, it spawns 3 like pillars. It's kind of like constructs. And then when you do enough lunar crystallization reactions, they'll resonate like, you know, Zhongli's pillar resonance, and then it'll do damage. And then this damage can critically strike, so that's good. And then its power scales with all elements who applied elements during the reaction. So what this tells me is that this reaction will probably have some sort of scaling like Lunar Charge, where everyone can take part of the reaction and incorporate their damage, but it's probably the 2 characters that do like the most damage that will take part in more of the scaling. So like for example, if you have Flynn's and Anefa in a Lunar Charge team, those 2 will be doing the most damage, so the Lunar Charge reaction is mostly based on their stats. And even though Aino is part of the reaction, her contribution gets like 1/12, right? So it's probably very similar for Lunar Crystallization. So back to Columbina's kit. Her normal attacks don't have anything really special except if you have a Verdant Dew. If you have a Verdant Dew, Columbina can consume 1 Dew and do a special charged attack. Now we don't know how much damage this does, we don't know if it's actually worth it or not, but I'm going to assume it is worth it because she can consume it, and this is probably going to be specifically for Nefer teams for Columbina to do damage. Next, one of her main skills, Elemental Skill, calls upon the tides of the Moon Sea, dealing AoE hydro damage and summoning a Gravitational Ripple. Gravitational Ripple follows the active character and deals continuous AoE hydro damage to nearby enemies. So this is great, it's just AoE hydro application and damage. Better than Aino because it spawns a circle and enemies can move around it, but for Columbina, it's going to follow you, kind of like a Nilou aura probably. So it's looking like much better hydro application compared to Aino. Then, when nearby party members trigger a lunar reaction or deal lunar reaction damage, Columbina gains New Moon's Omen for 2 seconds, accumulating 20 gravity every 2 seconds. The max gravity she can have is 60, and once she gets 60 gravity, she consumes that and triggers a tidal interference based on the most accumulated lunar reaction type. So this tidal interference is basically an extra trigger of off-field damage. So if you're in a lunar charge team, this tidal interference is going to be lunar charge damage. If you're in a lunar bloom team, this tidal interference is going to be lunar bloom damage. And if you're in a lunar crystallized team, this tidal interference is going to be lunar crystallized damage. So the more lunar reactions that you trigger and the more lunar reaction damage you do, you're going to gain more of this resource called gravity, and then this gravity is going to make Columbina deal more off-field attacks. Now with the design of Columbina seems to be heavily like off-field sub DPS, so this is going to probably be significant damage, but keep in mind that this tidal interference, number one, you need to trigger tons of lunar reactions to trigger it more for more gravity, right? And then the second is that this damage is lunar damage, and lunar damage doesn't actually apply an element, so it's not like you're applying extra electro or extra dendro if you're doing lunar bloom damage. The only application it's having is this AoE hydro damage from this like gravitational ripple. Then before we go on to the burst, let's go into this first passive, Lunacy Beneath the Moonlight. When tidal interference triggers, which is this off-field damage that happens when you do lunar reactions when you get the 60 gravity. So when that triggers that off-field damage, Columbina gains 5% crit rate for 10 seconds, max 3 stacks. So she basically gets 15% crit rate. That's pretty cool. Okay, now we can go on to our Elemental Burst. So Elemental Burst deals AoE Hydro damage and then creates a domain, while inside all party members gain increased lunar reaction damage. Cool, so this is basically Nahida's Burst. That deals extra damage, so duration has a longer duration than the cooldown, 60 energy cost, which is nice, but she definitely wants to cast this. Obviously we don't know how much this lunar reaction damage buff is, so we'll know later. But the other thing that also makes it very similar to Nahida's Burst is that Nahida's Burst had extra effects based on like Pyro, Electro, or Hydro, whatever, right? And this Moonlight Domain will have something similar. So when characters are in the Moonlight Domain, they will gain effects based on the triggered lunar reaction. So it buffs the lunar reaction. So if you trigger Lunar Charge, the Storm Cloud attack intervals are decreased by 0.5 seconds. So more damage from your normal Lunar Charge reactions where the Thundercloud spawns and then it strikes, usually, I believe it usually strikes the enemy that has both Hydro and Electro every 2.5 seconds, and now it's 2 seconds. So that's cool, extra damage. If you trigger Lunar Bloom, you get this new extra resource, Mountain Moon Verdant Dew. Basically, you get 3 extra dews, max 3 every 18 seconds. So instead of being able to hold 3 dews, you can hold 6 dews now. And that comes into play because we're going to assume that you want to use Columbina's charged attack, right? That consumes a verdant dew. So obviously you need more dews because we're assuming you're in a Nefer team, right? Nefer needs pretty much all the dews that she wants right now to do her special charged attacks, right? So getting an extra 3 dews will allow you to hopefully fit in maybe a Columbina charged attack and probably allow you to do a Llama hold E, because the thing here is that she consumes a verdant dew and it does Lunar Bloom damage, and that takes Llama's quill buffs from her burst, and you ideally want those to buff Nefer. But if you hold E, then you get more quills, so it's probably looking like a hold E on Llama angle. And lastly, for Lunar Crystallization, each lunar ward in Resonance has a 33% chance to strike again. So assuming that it's kind of like 3 pillars that resonate to do extra damage, has a chance to strike again, more damage. Whoopee. And lastly, the special passive, while in nod-krai, when a party member falls, Columbina revives that character and restores HP scaling with Columbina's friendship level. So that's interesting. Can occur every 100 seconds. Cool. And then strangely attuned to Kuvaki. Okay, so pretty much in summary, Columbina can enable lunar reactions on her own. You don't need a Nefer, you don't need Flinch, you don't need Nefer, you don't need the new Zibai or whatever for Lunar Crystallize. She can trigger it on her own. But her best teams will be supporting those characters. She will give buffs to lunar reaction damage, and she's probably going to deal a good amount of personal damage from off-field herself. It's definitely a good thing that she enables lunar reactions herself. However, Columbina is probably going to stick to just lunar reaction teams, as it is very unlikely that she'll be good for someone like Skirk, for instance. To quickly go over Constellations, C1 immediately triggers 1 instance of tidal interference, so that's just extra. So that's just extra of the off-field trigger of the damage. And then if you have Ascended Gleam, then you gain extra bonuses when that tidal interference is triggered. So that tidal interference again, when you get 60 gravity from dealing lunar reaction damage or triggering lunar reactions. So you get bonuses. Lunar Electrocharge gains 6 energy to the active character. Lunar Bloom gives you interrupting resistance for 8 seconds, which is honestly, I've been playing a lot of Nefer, that's kind of helpful. Lunar Crystallization gives you a shield, so that's very interesting. And then it says additionally, nearby party members, lunar reaction damage is increased by 3%. Now, I don't think this is normal damage bonus. This should say elevation, elevated by 3%. Now, elevation is a direct multiplier, so just increase by 3% damage to the team. Elevation is definitely a strong stat, definitely elevation, but it's just not translated well here. C2, gravity accumulation speed. So that means Columbina is going to be dealing more damage. When tidal interference triggers, she gains Moonlight's Grace for 8 seconds, so a buff, and that increases her HP. Oh yeah, she's HP scaling, by the way. Then with Ascended Gleam, when she has this buff, which she will always have since she should be triggering this tidal interference, which is her off-field damage, then she basically gives buffs to the active character. So if you trigger Lunar Charge, it increases the active character's attack based on her HP. If you trigger Lunar Bloom, it'll increase the character's EM based on her HP. And if you trigger Lunar Crystallize, it'll increase the active character's defense based on her HP. And then elevation 3%. So buffs to the active character, and technically more damage because of the HP and the gravity accumulation speed. That's cool. C4, when tidal interference triggers, again, that off-field damage, Columbina restores 4 elemental energy, and then she will increase all the lunar reaction damage based on her HP. So that's cool, extra damage, and then elevation by 3%. Lastly, C6, while inside the Moonlight Domain, which is her burst, after you trigger a lunar reaction, 80% crit damage for the corresponding elemental damage. Wow, 80% crit damage. Cool, another buff. And then 5% elevation, so more buffs. So probably going to be strong Constellations. We'll see if it's better to get Constellations on Columbina rather than the main DPSs. Probably not, but we'll see. So last few things on Columbina. There is a new set. There's actually 2 new sets that are releasing this patch. One of them is a Hex Ray set, and the second one is going to be for Columbina. So 2-piece increases Elemental Mastery by 80, and then for the 4-piece, while the wearer is off field, Lunar Reaction damage is increased by 20%, and then if you have Ascended Gleam, it's 40%. So the 4 set is basically 60% Lunar Reaction damage while you're off field. So this is pretty much Golden Troop, but for Lunar Reaction damage. There's pretty much only 2 characters that can use this set. Nefa can kind of use this set, but this set is pretty much made for Columbina. It's nothing much to say. She does off-field Lunar Reaction damage with her Tidal Interference. That's probably going to be where most of her damage is, so it's going to be Lunar Reaction damage. This gives 60% while she's off field, and she's going to be off field. So this is going to be best for her. Get ready to farm it. As for weapons, her signature is low base attack, 88.2% crit damage, so tons of crit damage, and then increases HP, so she's going to be HP scaler. And then when she triggers or deals Lunar Reaction, she gains 12 energy, so helps with ER requirements. And then gain a buff, and the buff gives her more HP and even more crit damage. So the signature helps her with her ER requirements and gives her a ton of damage. And you can see kind of from the signature's design where Columbina is designed to be an all-field sub DPS. Like all of this, there is no team buff in her signature. It's just all personal damage for Columbina. Then to quickly go over some other weapon options I've been looking at, Prototype Amber gives HP and then gives the energy regen after using burst. It's probably going to be good. She wants energy, she wants HP. Fully expecting that Favonius Codex will be good on her. Like Favonius weapons are super good on supports. Gives energy recharge, particles. It's going to be probably very useful, especially in Stygian. And then Sacrificial Jade is probably going to be really good. It gives her a ton of crit rate. She also ascends with crit rate, so she's going to have a lot of crit rate. So you're probably going to have to make sure you don't overcap. And then from off field, she gains EM and HP. This is probably going to be really good as well. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to just quickly go over on Columbina's kit. Very exciting. I'm really hyped for this beta. I'm very excited for Columbina. Again, this video is just a quick overview. I'm going to probably make an edited proper video on her when we get more multipliers. And as I said, we don't really know how good she is. We don't know how much damage she is. There's no numbers yet. But even without numbers, it's probably kind of easy to tell what team she's going to be good in. Flynn's team is going to be very good. Nefer team is going to be very good. Zibai, the lunar crystallized DPS that they're introducing, going to be bis. And then for other teams, I'm thinking about maybe a Nefa, Columbina, both sub DPSs, and kind of just wheelchair other, like any carry in the game maybe. That's probably going to be very strong. Maybe with Llama as well, just like triple off-field nod-krai sub DPS / supports just combined together with a main DPS, probably going to be very good. Hopefully this initial overview was a little bit helpful, give you a bit of my first impressions, definitely more informal. Again, I'll probably make another video on her very soon when we get more information. So with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.